Hello, welcome to Barb's Kitchen Center. My name is Celeste and this is my test kitchen. Today we're going to talk about altitude, and we're also going to make some cookies along the way. So if you are having trouble making a recipe, it doesn't quite turn out right, it's entirely possible your problem is altitude. So when you're looking at your recipe, also look at where it came from. If it came from some place like Colorado, where the altitude is very high, it's entirely possible it doesn't have enough dry ingredients in it. So you might have to add a little more flour, you might have to add a little more sugar. If you've got a recipe that comes from some place that's coastal, it's entirely possible, again, you may have too many dry ingredients and you're getting something that's very crunchy and not moist enough. So if you're having problems making a good cookie or a good cake, adjust your wet and dry ingredients just a little bit to see how that works out for you. Because truly, altitude is everything. So today we are going to spill sugar all over the board, but that's okay. Accidents happen in the kitchen, and that's not a bad one. Today we're going to make a chewy chocolate chip cookie. And this is a recipe, whenever I get a new cookbook, I always try the recipe exactly how it was intended to be made in the cookbook, and this is where I discovered this particular recipe was clearly from a place that was at a lower altitude than where I live here in Edmonton, Alberta, because the cookies I made were incredibly crispy and not very chewy at all. They just sort of crumbled when you bit into them. So the recipe calls for exactly 1 cup of butter, and so we will put 1 cup of butter into our mixer. And then it calls for a cup of sugar. Your white sugar is usually okay. Where I make the alteration is in the brown sugar. So I will put that in my mixer. And then it called for 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. I'm using 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and this will give me a nice chewy cookie as opposed to a dry cookie. So I'm going to cream this all together, which is going to be really loud and noisy. So all right, we've mixed for 2 minutes, and now we're going to add our we're going to add some wet ingredients and the rest of our dry ingredients. So I've added 1 egg already. I'm going to add the 2nd egg. I like to crack them into another bowl, just so I'm not cracking and opening what could potentially be a rotten egg into what can oftentimes be a group of very expensive ingredients. I'm going to add my tablespoon of baking soda and my 1/4 teaspoon of salt into my flour, and just mix it up a little bit so it kind of evenly disperses throughout my ingredients. All right, so I'll turn the mixer on again, and I will add this a little bit at a time. Right, you don't want to over mix it, you just want to mix it till you get a nice batter consistency. And I'm actually, probably should have done this before, but the Bosch is a great machine, and I'm going to take my whisks off and switch them out for cookie petals. Yes, I did wash my hands before I started all this, I promise. Want to get as much cookie dough off them as you can, because that could be 1 extra cookie. And when you're looking for something sweet in the middle of the night, heaven knows you need that 1 extra cookie. I know my hips probably don't need it, but I sure think I do. So there we go. Come on, midnight cookie. There we go. All right, I will switch out to my cookie petals. Cookie. There they are. Flip them onto my drive. Just make sure I get all of the stuff off the bottom and the sides, because you want to make sure you have all the butter, you want to make sure you have all the eggs, and all of the cookie goodness. I will open up my chocolate chips. You can use any kind of chocolate chip you want. I've made these with the micro mini chocolate chips, which makes it look like you have millions and millions and millions of chocolate chips in your cookies. I have, if you look back at our Facebook, we did a video on the various kinds of chocolate chips there were. You could even take chocolate, like hard block chocolate, and break it up and put it in here if you chose. You can use couverture chocolate, which is a chocolate that is generally tempered before you use it. But if you're using it in a cookie, it'll stay nice and soft and it won't firm up solid because you haven't tempered it. Or in a cookie like this that has a lot of sugar in it, I tend to use a semi-sweet or dark chocolate just to sort of balance the sweetness of it. But it's all up to you. Now the recipe calls for 1.5 cups or as many as you want. So you shan't be stingy with the chocolate chips. And I will probably put in close to 2 cups because I like a good chocolatey cookie. There we go. Now we have cookie dough. So I will clean up this mess and we will scoop them onto a tray and throw them into the oven. Welcome back. So now we're scooping cookies. I like to use a scoop because it gives me a fairly consistent size and all my cookies will turn out approximately the same size. Not identical because I don't get super fussy about how much. Kind of like scooping ice cream. You want it to be close, but it doesn't have to be perfect. And I like 3 across, and these guys shouldn't spread too much because it's nice if your cookie doesn't touch, whoops, the outside edge. With this cookie recipe as well, you could also roll it up into a ball or roll it into a sausage roll, stick it in the fridge for 3 or 4 days and cook cookies on demand. You could freeze it and do the same thing. We have the Super Cube cookie dough savers, and we also have the Smart cookie savers. So you can spread your dough into that, put it in the freezer, and you can have cookies anytime you want. So this is going to give me, I think that's probably enough. If I crowd them anymore, they're going to all mush together and make just a great big cookie sheet cookie. So I will put this one in the oven. I will set a timer for 10 minutes. The recipe says 12 to 15, but I like to set my time a little lower because you never ever know if your oven is truly true. I mean, you can have an oven thermometer in there, but then you don't know for sure if the person who wrote the recipe book is cooking in a convection oven. Are they cooking in a home convection oven? Are they cooking in a commercial convection oven? All of these things make a difference.
Altitude.
And of course, your altitude. There we go. And you'll notice I didn't use pan spray. I used a piece of parchment paper in the bottom of my cookie sheet. If you want to use pan spray as well, you can. If you're using pan spray, spray the pan, put the parchment paper down because the pan spray will keep the parchment paper in place. Again, because it's cookies, and in my house with 3 boys, cookies last about on a good day, maybe 10 minutes after they come out of the oven. So it really doesn't matter how they look, as long as they are chocolatey and sweet and yummy. Everybody's happy. So I figure, why go the extra step of using pan spray to hold a piece of paper down when it means I then just have to do an extra wash on the pan. So when I get in a cookie making mood, I will often make several different types of cookies, and if I use parchment paper, then I don't have to wash the pan in between. I can oftentimes use the same piece of parchment paper if it hasn't gotten too messy, or I can just change out the parchment paper without having to wash the pan. So the other thing I was going to mention is brown sugar savers. So you know how your brown sugar can get kind of hard And sometimes you stick an orange in it, or you stick a piece of bread in it, or you stick an apple in it. And then you come back to your brown sugar 3 or 4 months later and you have a nasty apple or a nasty orange, sort of all dehydrated and looking like a soft sculpture in your brown sugar. You can also get these fabulous, if I can get it out of here, brown sugar discs. They're just simply fired but unbisked clay, and you soak them in water. Shake them off so they're not sopping wet. Throw them in your brown sugar, and your brown sugar will stay nice and soft for a very, very long time. If you have a big container of brown sugar, throw 2 or 3 in, but it'll keep your brown sugar nice and soft, and you won't have to deal with molding fruit in your brown sugar, which is always unpleasant, having dealt with more than my fair share of molded fruit in my brown sugar. All right, so in 6 minutes, we should have some cookies coming out of the oven. So our cookies have just come out of the oven. They look lovely and nice and soft, but they're a little too hot to eat just yet. I have another batch of cookies in the oven, and I have a little bit of cookie dough left over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Super Cube cookie saver, and I'm going to scoop my balls of cookie dough, into the Super Cube cookie saver, so that when I decide I want some cookie dough, which you really shouldn't eat because it has raw eggs in it, but I know secretly we all do, or some of us do. Or if I decide I want to make cookies, or I have some unexpected company come in, I can pull these out of the freezer and have nice, warm, soft, chewy chocolate chip cookies in a matter of 10 minutes. Because when you're pulling these out of the freezer, you really don't have to thaw them out. You can just put them on your pan, as long as they're in the shape you want. I mean, if you want to smush them down and make them a wee bit flatter, then you might want to wait for them to thaw out. But for the most part, I am pretty happy. Oh, that guy might be a little fat, so we'll just share some of that with his partner next door. I am pretty happy with whatever shape they come out in. So I'll push on the lid. I will pop them in the freezer, and I will have cookies ready to make anytime.